In this video, I'm going to talk about a couple of texturing tricks that I use. These came up recently in an online session with one of my students, and I thought maybe this would be a good thing for some of the readers. So I hope you can get something out of this. I'm using Greg Arsino's Louisiana Creole table from Fine Woodworking 238 as the example in this video. And there's two things going on here. One is an apron like this would typically be made out of one piece of wood, but then it would be ripped into three, and then the center section gets cross-cut to get the drawer front out. And I wanted to show that with the texture as if it's one piece glued back together. But in another part of the plan, I want to show the same apron exploded. And so, you can see these pieces and see how it comes apart or goes together. So that's one thing that I want to show. And then on the top, I don't need to show the top as multiple pieces. I'm leaving that as a single component. But here I want to show that it's made up of several pieces cut out of a long board. And so I've got the subtle glue lines where the texture changes. And for this to work well, you need a long texture. In this case, my texture for my top is 10 feet long. So, and it's actually about as wide as this tabletop, but I wouldn't probably make the tabletop out of one piece of pine. That's a sure recipe for disaster. So anyway, let's take a look and I'll show you how I go about doing this. So here I have the table ready to texture the front apron, the drawer front, and the top. Let's do the front apron first. So I'm going to get rid of everything but the apron, the front, and well, the back apron has the same tag, so it's going to be there, but it doesn't really matter. And let's go to my materials. This one, I'm going to start by, well, let's start at the top. So I'm going to start by selecting all of the geometry here. I just triple clicked on that. And then I'm going to get my texture. I'm going to use this one here. And I'm going to apply that on that front face. And then SketchUp just aligns the material all the way around. I'm not going to worry about the end grain. I sometimes fudge that a little bit by rotating it, but I'm not going to do that here. Not terribly important. And then I'm going to right click on just this front face. So I change my selection to the front face, and I'm going to right click and choose position. And you see my texture went with the corner right at the component's origin, and in this case I need that to be down farther. And just to make it more visible as to what's going on here, I'm going to pick a sort of if there's a highly figured section on this texture, that's what I'm picking here. So that you can see how that's going to be arranged. Actually, let me bring back the rest of my model here so we can get an idea. So I have a keyboard shortcut to hide the rest of the model, and I've just turned that feature off. But you can see how the grain now can go down across this piece, all the way down. So I'll leave it like that, and I'll right click and choose done. And now I'm going to open the center section of the apron, and I'm going to triple click on and select all of that geometry. Now, if I just grab the same texture again and I apply it, let me right click here again, and I choose position, you can see that it's put the corner of the texture at the component's origin, and that's normal. And I could have moved the component's origins to one common place, but it's a whole lot easier to do this differently. So I'm just going to undo my painting and select all of that geometry. And then I can get the paint bucket tool from here, or I could have selected the eyedropper from materials window, or use B for the keyboard shortcut. But now I'm going to hit Alt on the Mac, that'd be a command, and I'm going to sample the texture that I applied on the top component and apply it to here. So now when let me right click on this and show position, and you can see that it's positioned to line up with the first one. So do the same thing here, and again, instead of grabbing it here, this time I'm going to just sample from the materials window. I'm just going to select that, and I could have sampled off the top one. And now I've got that texture running all the way across. And let's get that drawer front while we're at it. All right. Not the prettiest part of that board, I guess, but it'll work for this example. Now, the bottom surface, because it's curved, is kind of funky on this one, and so I'm going to fix that. And so I'm going to open this component for editing, and I'm going to hide the rest of it. And normally I would probably change this. Well, actually I will. I'm going to move the texture here so I'm not in that same section. Maybe we'll take this sort of planar section of the material. Having a large texture image is really useful for that kind of thing, because I can pick and choose different parts of the board. And so that's done, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this again, and I'm going to choose texture, and I'm going to make it projected. And then I can use my eyedropper to sample that, orbit to underneath, and apply the material to those surfaces. And I'll, just because, I'll do the bottoms of my tenons that way, since I've done the tops. All right. So if I had a view where this was going to show, at least I'm in pretty good shape that way. All right. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to hide my seam lines here. And so, but I don't want to hide the seam line where the drawer front is. So I'm going to open my component for editing, and I'm going to start at the corner of my drawer front, and I'm just going to come through to the back. And because I've got a keyboard shortcut for it, another way I would do this is I've got the drawer front there as a reference. Now I can turn off the rest of my model, and I can draw the rest of that line. All right. So here I'm going to double click on that face, come down here and double click on that face, and then I'm going to hide the geometry that's selected. Let's work on this one. Now this one, all I need to do is select my top and bottom faces. If you don't hide the faces, they will bleed through. Don't really need to do that one that's in the tenon, but I will. There we go. Or that would be hidden in the mortise. And again, I'm going to hide those. And now you see how seam lines don't show here. So let's do the same thing here. This one, let's bring that back. We'll do that and hide and go back in the green direction. And unhide it and hide it. And there's our green. And we'll hide these faces and the edges. So there's hide up there. All right. So now that looks like it's all been glued back up and there's no visible glue line. So now we'll move on to the top. Okay, so here's the table ready to have the top textured. So let's get rid of everything else, get that out of the way. And what I need to do is I need to divide my top surface, and actually I want to divide the end profiles and the bottom into series of faces, running with those faces running their long direction along the tabletop. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to, actually let's use the rectangle tool instead. I'm going to stand that up. And I'm just going to draw, the size of this doesn't matter that much, but what I've found is kind of useful here is to move the rectangle so that none of its edges are actually on the top. And then I know that I want to divide my top into 5-inch wide planks. So I'm going to, while that's selected, I'm going to copy that 5 inches, and then I'm going to hit X3. And then I don't need this front one. All right, now I'm going to open the component for editing. And let's bring back the rest of our model here. And I'm going to right-click and choose Intersect Faces with Model. Then I'm going to get out of that, and I'm just going to select my rectangles and delete those. So you can see now that I've got these lines on the surfaces. All right, now another thing that I'm going to do here, and this is kind of to help me set up my texture, is I'm going to use an extension that creates a bounding box. Oop, better select that thing so it knows what to do. So this bounding box is the thing, and it's just going to put in some construction geometry here. The other thing is, and basically what I want is, in this case, is I just want a guide point out here at the corner, but I'm going to put in some other guidelines. So the top is 31.5 inches long. So I'm going to put in a guideline at 31.5, and I'm going to do 2 more. And so 31.5 times 2. So I've got those out here. And then I'm going to set, and part of this I know because I've already done this setup once. I kind of know where I want to put these. But what I'm doing is I'm creating some points for aligning my texture. And so this is going to be 5. Now let's put, we're going to need one out here. There we go. And we'll put one there just because. So I've got some points here for applying my texture. Now, I can start out by selecting all of this and applying my texture to it. And so it's all done on there. But what I'm going to do now is move this. So I right-click on the face, choose Texture, Position, and you see again the red handle went to the corner. But what I'm going to do is I don't want to use this area that's got the little pitch pocket. That's why I knew I wanted to do this. And so if I grab that red pin, I can put it on that guideline, on the intersection of the guideline. And then my next one, so I'm done with that. This one, now you see it looks I'm duplicating the texture here. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to go up here and position this one. And this one I'm going to move over here. So it's basically like I'm using the end or the next chunk of this texture. If I come here, now I come to here, and I'm using the next bit of that texture. Again, this requires a long texture to make this work. This one, now, the position is here, and so I went here. I want to come, let's come down here. And now I know that my texture isn't long enough to get a fourth board out of this for the next section, so I'm going to effectively get into another board. So texture position, but this one I think I will, I don't know, let's try, yeah, that's good enough for this. Okay, so we're done with that. So if I deselect all of that, you can see how my texture changes at those seam lines. Now I need to handle the edges here, the profiled edges. And so what I'm going to do is go in here and change each of these to projected. If I don't make them projected, they won't apply correctly on the curved surfaces. So there we go. And then I can take my, let's get the paint bucket. And if I get my sample tool and click, and you see how the texture ends up wrapping right over the end here. So now we'll sample that and do the same thing on that end and on that end and there and there and there. I don't have to do this front edge because it all is joined as one surface here, or treated as one surface, because I've got some softened edges right in the corner there. So that makes that easier. And so now, let's get out of that. We're going to erase our guidelines. And now I'm going to select just my seam lines. And by the way, there are no internal faces on this top because the rectangles that I intersected with it were outside of the component. Do a hide. And now that's done, and you can see how I have my subtle glue lines. And you can see how the texture gets cut. But it all matches pretty well. And so now we can bring back the rest of our table. And that thing is done. Hopefully there's something there that you can take away. If you have any questions, by all means, feel free to ask in the comments.